So as I shared earlier, what I've decided to do is I want to profile 4 students just to give you sort of a greater depth of their testimonials. My first, or one of the high school participants that I've chosen to profile is Jennifer. She was born in Puebla, Mexico. She came into the U.S. at 1 year old through the desert, and she has always known about her status. And she's part of a mixed status family, so she is the eldest of 3 siblings. So both of her siblings were born in the U.S. Martin is one of my community college students who was born in Jalisco, Mexico. He came into the U.S. at 15 years old, and he was aware of his status because he knew that once his visa expired, he would automatically become an undocumented immigrant. Martin's entire family came in with the visa, so by default, overstaying their visa makes him undocumented now. Jasmine is another community college student born in Baja California Norte. She came into the U.S. at 5 years old, and she found out about her status in high school. Like a lot of youth, what the literature shows is a lot of youth find out around that time, trying to apply for FAFSA or get driver's license and so forth. Jasmine is part of a mixed status family. And then lastly, we have Blanca, who's one of my university students born in Guanajuato. She came into the U.S. at 2 years old through the desert and with the assistance of a coyote. And she found out about her status in middle school, so a little bit earlier. Doesn't necessarily align with the existing literature on when they find out. And then Blanca's also the eldest of her family of 4. Her 3 siblings, or children, her 3 siblings are all U.S. born. As I mentioned earlier, the argument that I'm making with this data is that legal consciousness, so again, their knowledge and awareness of immigration laws, like the ones I mentioned earlier, result in discursive identities and activism that are rooted in comparison. So some of the themes that I found across the data, across the testimonials of participants, is this idea that illegality, finding out about their illegality had a profound effect on their lives. So this idea of sort of shifting, for those actually that found out about their status a little early or a little later, they talked about it sort of really shifting their sense of who they were, right? All of a sudden finding out that they're legal sort of just rattled their sense of self. In addition, there's also this idea of the complexity of accepting and deflecting identity labels, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. So this idea of being imposed identity labels, and then also how do we adopt labels, or how do we go about choosing adopting labels. Another thing that I'll talk about too is the educational level and what that meant for legal consciousness. So I'll talk about that a little later. And then the variation that I saw in terms of when or how or if students decided to disclose their status, I also said that there's some relationship there in terms of whether they decided to be activists or not. So when I speak about imposed and adopted labels, I see this idea of identity sense making, at least for my participants as undocumented youth, as a seesaw effect, where in one sense we have these imposed labels by society, institutions, laws, and even family, some of them being illegal alien, race or ethnicity being described as Hispanic, and then working class, again, by the limited employment prospects. But then there's this sense of, on the other hand, the youth are sort of pushing back and resisting some of those labels by, instead of identifying as legal alien, adopting Dreamer, for example, or AB 540, or even Documented, a newer one, and identifying racially or ethnically as Mexican. Class-wise, I'll show you guys some quotes where some of the students actually talked about, described their socioeconomic status as rich. So it's a matter of perspective, and again, the sense of like, I need to sort of compare myself in terms of what I have or what others don't have. So I see this sort of, I'm really interested in this part of like, what does this negotiation process look like with the pushing back and being imposed different identity labels. All participants expressed their dislike for derogatory terms such as illegal alien and wetback. As they rejected these labels, they would use I, we, or us to make statements like, we are humans, not aliens. In their denouncement of such terms, participants would address imposing parties as they or them. So again, this, if you guys can recall, this goes back to social identity theory, this idea of comparison and making sense of our identity based on our group and our out-group dynamics. So here's an example of immigration levels, and just one example of Jennifer in this case, who shares her thoughts around illegal alien. She says, illegal alien, I don't like it. It just sounds like we came from another planet when they use the word alien specifically. It's just that we are people like you. So it's this idea again of, I don't like that term, someone is sort of telling us or describing us this way, but I'm rejecting that label.